You know what I hear from homeschool moms everywhere? They're looking for biblical accuracy in their children's Bible curriculum without the fluff. And according to a survey done by my friends at Lifestone Ministries, 46% of Christian families say that theological soundness is their biggest concern. Unlike workbook heavy programs that drain the joy from Scripture, the Illuminate Bible series from Lifestone Ministries will take your family deep into God's Word in just 15 minutes a day. No excessive crafts, no surface level lessons, just pure biblical truth. Each week's simple 5-step approach explores the story, context, scripture connections, and doctrine with real life application. At under $1 a lesson, one parent guide serves multiple children with age appropriate workbooks. Zero stress. Most families seek a curriculum based on Bible alignment above everything else, and this is where the Illuminate Bible series shines. Visit lifestoneministries.org/Heidi to anchor your child's learning in the Word of God. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Heidi St. John podcast. Today's conversation could not be more timely. We are living in a monumental moment, a profound cultural upheaval. I talk about it almost weekly here at the show. Every day we feel the pressure mounting from schools, from institutions, from the government, even from within the church. My guest today is Dr. Corey Miller, and he's going to argue that we are not simply drifting. We are in the middle of an ideological revolution. He calls it the progressive miseducation of America. I fell in love with his work. You guys are going to love him because in his book, he pulls back the curtain on the powerful forces that are shaping the culture, infiltrating our institutions, and reshaping the minds of the next generation. Corey is bold and articulate. He's not afraid to name what many people feel but can't quite put words to. And so if you've ever wondered why the world seems upside down, why truth feels negotiable, and why America's foundations are being rewritten, this is a conversation that you're not going to want to miss. This is the Heidi St. John podcast. Stick around. I think you're going to be encouraged. Thank you guys for tuning in today. Before I get into it, I want to say thank you to the prime sponsor of the Heidi St. John podcast. We are being sponsored in part by my friends at the Functional Medical Institute. You can find out more by going to homeschoolhealth.com. All right, you guys, this is a really important conversation at an incredibly important time in our country's history. We have watched now the rise of cultural Marxism, now actual Marxism here on the shores of the United States. We've seen Zohan Mamdani be elected, this communist, socialist new mayor of the city of New York. Our colleges and institutions are being overrun by progressive ideals, and the Christian worldview is being increasingly marginalized. And I'm excited to have Corey Miller on the show with me. I have never had him on before, but I think you guys are going to love this conversation because I think even when the political pendulum swings the other way, it's likely going to be brief. People keep talking about, all the things that the conservatives can do, which for goodness sake is a question for another day. But America has really been set up to withstand wisely by our founders to withstand a lot of these pendulum swings. And I love one of the quotes that I read from Corey Miller because he's reminding us that the country isn't bulletproof. And so I'm really happy to have him here. Corey Miller, my friend, welcome to the podcast.
It is so good to be here with you, Heidi. I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. We have some shared history, a little bit of Multnomah vibes going on here.
Right. Just recently finding that out, but we have similar stock and similar vision. I think we resonate together on a number of things.
Yeah, I agree. Let's jump into this. Your book is sitting on my desk here today, The Progressive Miseducation of America. I'm super fascinated by this topic, partly because I'm a homeschooler and partly because I believe, and I bet you agree with me, that you can trace a lot of the really bad ideas that are in our country today and the slide that we have now towards socialism and communism on our education system. And you say that education has become so thoroughly secularized that an alternative viewpoint is foreign and unwelcome and attacked and often even pushed out. So you say that there's a 23-to-1 ratio of professors unfavorable to Christian beliefs on college campuses. And now we see postmodernism, Marxist usurped ground that was once the domain of Bible-believing Christians. And you say we've really lost the American universities to post-Christian secularists, and this is one of the biggest tragedies of our time. Uh, you start out your book by saying we're in a revolution, and what do you mean? Those are that's serious words right there. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, the original title of the book was The Third Revolution: From the Campus to the Culture and a Vision Forward.
Ooh, I like
The
that
publisher,
too.
I like it. The publisher changed it. They're the owners of the book. I'm just the author. And it was missing the term progressive, but Pete Hegseth actually had the exact same title for a documentary. So we entered the word progressive in there as well. So things have changed. But yeah, I studied all the major primary literature on revolutions, East and West, to kind of get a grasp of what is going on in America, how this is no longer grandma's America, how we have
Mm.
lost the country, and looking no further than the universities. And so I draw out in the second part of the book what happened to the universities, because people have this intuition. So they've heard, at least, maybe their intuition from culture is that we've got this division of faith and reason. And so the Christians need to just go into their closets or maybe their churches. But the mature people, the reasonable people, the scientific people, they go on to the universities. But no, we started almost all of the universities for the first 200 years, and their college presidents were also members of the clergy, offering the chief capstone class on moral philosophy before sending the students out into the world. And something happened to create the first ideological revolution, or to facilitate it. And that lasted a certain period of time. And then there was a second. And so I'm calling for a third. And the third part of the book then is about that. So I give the story of how our universities were taken over. And when I tell that, there's a clue in there on how we can reclaim them and how we must reclaim them. It's not an option.
Well, we don't have, 15 hours obviously today because we could talk about this for a really long time. But can you just encapsulate how we got here? I mean, how did the universities become hijacked? Because I would submit that even universities that have the name Christian on them, many of them have been co-opted.
Yeah, it's like the law of physics, entropy. Things go from order to disorder. And if
Mm.
we do not guard against mission drift, that is simply par for the course. And so, we started as soon as the pilgrims got off their ships, got their bellies full of turkey for Thanksgiving, they went and started Harvard not long thereafter. And its motto was Veritas, in Latin, truth, and it's capital T, truth, for the Puritans. They're thinking all truth is God's truth. They quickly changed it to truth for Christ and the church, which lasted almost 300 years until 1936. Then Yale started, and then Princeton, and then Columbia. And I've visited all of the colonial schools. They're all Christ centered. By the end of the 17th century, half the graduates of Harvard had become pastors and missionaries. But this lasted about 200 years until 1840, where the vast majority of college presidents were also members of the clergy. Up until 1880, church and chapel attendance were still required. But that first period of 1880 to 1930, something happened. We didn't have any doctoral degrees. So we sent our people over to Germany, the most formally educated country in the history of the world. And we think about all the bright minds there, like Immanuel Kant. You Kant no ultimate reality, the father of agnosticism, the tail end of the Enlightenment. You got, you have people like Hegel, Marx, Engels, Freud, Nietzsche, the father of modern liberal theology, Schleiermacher, biblical higher criticism, and all of the graduates would come back, and the battle was on for 50 years, and they took over Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, forcing us to start all over, which was Calvin, Wheaton, Biola, and so forth, which are also now seeing failure to the
Hmm.
second revolution, because what happened right when the dust was settling in the 30s, there was this little nefarious movement over in Germany once again called the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. Today we hear
Yep.
about critical race theory, critical gender theory, critical pedagogy, critical queer theory, critical anything theory. If it's not critical thinking, run as fast as you can the other direction, because it's Marx plus whatever topic it's addressing. And they were the globalist socialists. Most of their founders were Jewish, but they were the globalists. They were the anti-fascists or Antifa, and they were facing off with their competitors, the National Socialists, who liked borders, also liked blonde hair and blue eyes, but there were small differences. They were all socialists in Germany. And once Hitler rose to power, the little mustache guy scared them out of town. If you're a Jewish guy and a globalist, you had to leave. So they went over to Columbia, Brandeis, UCLA, and other places, starting there. And right below them, in what I call the Axis powers of globalist socialism, Marxism, that was Antonio Gramsci. Gramsci is listed as one of the most dangerous, perhaps, cultural Marxists, even though he never got out of prison. He wrote his prison notes and they got mediated into the English speaking world right here in my state of Indiana at Notre Dame University, of all places, by a Marxist professor with the name Joseph Buttigieg, father of Mayor Pete.
Uh-oh.
And then about 15 years later, postmodernism began with the French. And you would think in postmodernism, it's all relativism, radical skepticism, cynicism. You would think their politics would be everything from left to right and in between. They're not. They're all hard left, the new left from the first and second generations, because they were also card-carrying members of the French Communist Party or sympathizers. All of those people likewise came over to the US, and they're not small names. They're like Derrida, deconstructionism, Lyotard, or Foucault. Google academic has no one even approximating as many citations of any scholar in history than him. They all came over to our top universities and they began putting their seeds, their wild oats into the culture. Marcuse led the sexual revolution. They called him the faculty advisor. And by the time you get to the after the 60s, they didn't make it as far as they wanted to. Sexually, they did. Racially, they did not. MLK said something about watch my character, not my skin pigment. And they kind of think he was racist. He was colorblind. They're color obsessed. And they didn't get the American public's approval when they were bombing police stations and stuff like that. And so they said, okay, we need to follow our original plan, and that is the long march through the institutions. And they said the workers of the world unite, the proletariat and the revolutionaries. They can no longer be the people on the factory floor. They need to be the elites. It is academia. And so when the cultural Marxists planned this out, they said we need to go after the institutions in the West, that is academia, media, and ecclesia, the churches. And that's what they've been doing. And so from the academic standpoint, where in the 90s, the ratio of liberal to conservative professor was 2.3 to 1. Now, 30 years later, it's 12 to 1 for those retiring, 23 to 1 for those who are just getting tenure and have a Supreme Court lifetime appointment, you might say, ahead of them. And 27 to 1 at the Ivy Leagues, and those are the real radical ones. And if you go into religious studies, it's 70 to 1. Yale came out recently and said that in their social sciences and humanities, remember, Yale is the school of the presidents and the Supreme Court, it's 78 to 1. What parents, what pastors are preparing their kids to go into these secular baptismal fonts, which are a monolithic ideology? So they're the first and second revolutions, and we need a third revolution.
What if your morning cup of coffee could do more than just wake you up? Introducing coffee from my friends at Equipping the Persecuted. It's a high-end specialty roast coffee that's been crafted with excellence, but here's the difference. 100% of every dollar you spend with Equipping the Persecuted goes directly to saving the lives of persecuted Christians in Nigeria. Over the last 5 years, 90% of Christian persecution deaths worldwide have occurred in Nigeria. That's why every bag of ETP coffee matters. The Bible says whatever you eat or drink, do it all to the glory of God. And with ETP coffee, your daily cup becomes an act of faith, providing food, medical aid, schools, and protection for those suffering simply because they follow Christ. So drink coffee that makes an eternal impact. Order now at etpcoffee.com and share the mission by inviting friends to join you at etpcoffee.com. Man, and we need it right now. I mean, I think that what we're seeing happen in our public high schools, I mean, right all the way down to kindergarten, we are indoctrinating our children into a perversion of sexual ideology, starting from when they're 5 years old. We are cranking out by the hundreds of thousands out of our public high schools, kids who hate the country. They have no framework for freedom whatsoever. We've been completely had our history rewritten in the public schools. We're not teaching civics. And then you find an entire generation of Christians who have disengaged from the public square because of some knucklehead somewhere told us that we don't belong there. And so it really is, to my way of thinking. I was on the news the other day and someone asked me if I thought the schools could be reformed. And I said, no, dude, the public schools is a 5 alarm fire. And they're not broken. They're doing exactly what they were designed to do. And this is how Marxism has so easily infiltrated. You write a lot about postmodernism. And you say in your book that it's an extension of cultural Marxism, which I agree with. And I'm wondering if you can, just for the sake of the audience and putting this into perspective, define postmodernism and why you say that it is an extension of cultural Marxism.
Yeah, no one has been able to successfully define postmodernism.
That's what I'm
Uh,
wondering. I'm like, people say it, and I'm like, what's your definition? It's like, what is a woman?
that's right, exactly. Uh, you can characterize it. You can throw socks on the wall and get really close to it. It's a radical form of skepticism about any knowledge claims, right?
Hmm.
Because what they like to say in postmodern thought is that knowledge is a social construction of reality,
Okay.
of all reality, including self-identity. That's not just gender identity, it's species identity, it's everything, right? And that's where you can get and that's where these founders of postmodernism were also card-carrying members of the French Communist Party. They have latched on to the tail end of the neo-Marxist, cultural Marxist ideas at the level of dogma. The haves and the have-nots, victims and victimizers, uh, that kind of idea, where you're splitting people
It's
and
class
dividing them.
warfare.
Right, class warfare. But their philosophical strategy is to change the narratives. They don't like meta narratives. They don't believe in meta narratives. They disdain it. They even don't like the sciences. So whereas modernity was bringing about the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution, the postmodernists like to even claim today that scientific minded people are likewise using post colonialist, imperialist methods, including logic and science, to subdue those marginalized people. So, postmodernism, in a word, is kind of like relativism, but
Hmm.
there's internal incoherency there. Because if it's relativism and if deconstructionism is always deconstructing every belief, aren't you going to eventually deconstruct deconstructionism? Wouldn't the skeptic have to be skeptical of even skepticism?
Hmm.
And so there is a confusion and it's a deception too. Which one is the real belief? Is it the Marxism? Rather, the Marxism is the real belief, the core, and postmodernism is the skepticist, the skeptic's way of just chipping away at truth claims and confidence in any
So more
beliefs
of a
about,
vehicle.
or vice versa. Yeah, I mean, that's an area of scholarship in itself, because those two systems, just like lesbian and transgender, don't go well together. Because you brought up, what is a woman? If you're a
Hmm.
lesbian, you're a woman. But trans want to say there's no essence, right? The postmodernist, there is no essence. And this is where you even get theologians like Lynn Tonstad at Yale Divinity School, who has a book called Queering God, or Queer
Yeah.
Theology, talking about queering Christianity. Well, what does the word queer mean? It's not a male gay person. Queer means an identity without an essence. They don't believe in natures. They don't believe in essences. And she said, right up front, my students are not going to be studying theological texts here. We're going to be studying queer theory and talking about queering God and queering Christianity. This is Yale Divinity School.
Horrifying.
So Yeah, and just last month, Harvard they already have their lead chaplain as an atheist, but now they have a and not just trans, but a drag queen professor named Lahore Vaginistan,
Oh
and
my
teaching
goodness.
courses on things like that. It's crazy how far we've come. But when you, Heidi, when you brought up the public schools, I'm going to say it's even in the private Christian schools.
I
And
agree.
my daughter is an elementary education major across the street here at Purdue University. I get to see all of her syllabi, and it's woke throughout. And so even if she decided to go on and teach in the public school system, or sorry, in the private Christian school system, she and other people like her are going to take that with them. They're not going to be as fortunate, most of them, to have a philosopher like me who sniffs this stuff out and can taste it and
Yep.
warn her about it. So these people are entering into our Christian school, K through 6, and teaching this stuff. And this comes back from, like Paulo Freire, he's the fourth most cited author in all the social sciences, a Brazilian Marxist who wrote the Pedagogy of the Oppressed. You think
Oh,
about those two words again, critical pedagogy, the oppressed. He influenced Pope Francis. He also wrote the foreword to James Cone, the father of modern Black liberation theology, to his books. And James Cone's two child prodigies were Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock, who did his eulogy, and Jeremiah Wright, the Obama pastor, when Obama, who wrote in his own book, I chose my professors, the Marxists, post colonialists, and so forth. Well, Paulo Freire is all about the pedagogy. He targeted the schools of education, and all of our schools are Freirean Marxist colleges of education.
this is making me this is making me want to just cry because I I think, we talk about politics a lot here at the show. I ran for Congress. I believe that Christians need to be involved politically, but the reality is from where I'm sitting, if we don't get a handle on the education system, including the public schools. I mean, I, of course, I'm a huge proponent of homeschooling. I keep telling parents, get your children out of these schools. This is a five-alarm fire. But to me, if we don't get a handle on the education system and on what's happening in our universities, we can elect a great guy if we can elect somebody great in 2028, maybe even 4 years after that. But eventually, we're just going to be outnumbered by these guys because you can't stop the bleeding. It's coming out of our systems of education, and parents who are not paying attention are dropping their kids off at these schools, as Vodi Bakum used to say, sending them to Rome to be educated, and then shaking their heads in disbelief when they come out as Romans.
Yeah, it's like, just a couple of years ago, more middle school girls were transing than middle school girls existing, right?
Yeah,
It was like something was in the water.
the
It's
social
coming out
contagion.
of their social contagion from their TikTok, from their friends, the school systems they're in. But all of that, the K through 12 teachers are coming from the university. The pastors are coming from the university.
Yep.
The political leaders are coming from the university. Our doctors, our lawyers, our media elite are coming from the university. So my mantra is, it may be the case, maybe not the case that what happened in Vegas stays in Vegas. It is absolutely not the case that what happens in the universities stays in the universities. As go the universities, so goes the culture. As goes the US university, so goes the world, to the point that 1 in 3 world leaders, presidents, prime ministers, or dictators, got an academic degree from a US university. This is ground zero for influence. And when I say that the university is the most influential institution shaping civilization, people push back, Christians, and say, no, it's the church. And I say, really? If
Eh.
30% of the country goes to church weekly and 39% almost weekly, exactly 39% are enrolled in the universities at the ages 18 to 24. If you go to church weekly, you get 52 sermons a year. You get 60 sermons your first semester as a freshman at the universities. Who has the ear, and why do we live in an assassination culture? And those assassins are younger and younger. They're closer to the epicenter of the university.
And so true. You talk about Marxism and Karl Marx a lot in your book, and you say that he was wrong about virtually everything, right, that he predicted. So if this is the case, why do you think that so many people still think his ideas work? Why do we have people like Zoran Mandani in New York City and the Marxists in the city of Portland right now who are pushing his ideas?
Marxism is it's a parasite on Christianity. That's where you get people saying Jesus was a Marxist and Paul was a Marxist. In the book of Acts, they talk about the church redistributing its wealth, giving to each according to their
In the
need.
book of Acts, sure.
Yeah, and Jesus loving the poor, and so they like to often quote the Old Testament, and then they'll quote, if anything, in the New Testament, it's usually that part in Acts or the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus loved the poor, and so what Marx did when he wrote Das Kapital, if you've ever read it, it really makes the bleeding heart begin. You can't help but feel bad when you think about the oppressive conditions with children during, that industrial revolution. Um, but as people have said, if you're not a leftist by age 20, you have no heart. If you're not conservative by age 30, you have no
They have no
brain.
brain. It's true.
Yeah, I mean, this is what happens when Christianity abdicates its own brain, then a
Yes.
vacuum fills it, and this is what happened. Mark Knoll wrote a book, the historian Mark Knoll, The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind. And the scandal was 30 years ago, I think he wrote it, that there isn't much of an evangelical mind.
Mhm.
And so we've got this menace of mindless Christianity that has infiltrated even into the pastorate.
Yep.
And, our pastors, many of them are severely lacking in a biblical worldview. They're more engaged in skinny jeans and fog machines and getting their information from sociology and culture and relevant magazine than they are theology and scripture and Christian thought. And so they push that off onto the parents. The parents, for one reason or another, ideological, economical, whatever, both are now working. It's really hard. You get home, you're exhausted. There's this new thing called youth pastor that's been around for decades. So instead of just training your kid in the way they should go, and when they get older, they get conscripted to work for the other side when they go to the university, now they go in brainless to the university because you pawn them off onto the youth pastor whose biblical worldview is less than the statistics showing about the Christian pastor, which right now in 2023 is 37% of American pastors hold a biblical worldview. But if you count evangelical and non denominational, it's 51 to 57%. That's horrible. So we're losing it in the church, we're losing it in the home. And what do you expect when you send them off to these secular baptismal fonts? It's shooting fish in a barrel. You wonder why we've lost Grandma's America, why we're radicalizing so rapidly. This is why we need to start following Jesus again, get rid of the menace of mindless Christianity, start following Jesus and loving God with our mind. That was a command, and everybody needs to prepare. If you're not going to go back in and reinfiltrate the education system like we are doing at Ratio Christi, you at least need to prepare for what's coming downstream from the upstream in education, and prepare your flocks, prepare your families, prepare your friends, because you cannot hide from it. It's coming into our churches, it's coming into our families, and you can't even run into your closets anymore because we have iPhone there. And that's where the kids are going to mom and dad, grandma and grandpa saying, Mom, Dad, would you rather have a living son or a dead daughter? You choose. And then the parents go progressive just to hold on like a shoestring to that relationship.
Yeah. When you say that we should be preparing, I want to give people some sort of practical takeaways because I think, I talk about this stuff a lot on the show. And then I've got, someone as educated and wise as you talking about the same thing. And I think it's easy for just, regular people like Heidi St. John to start to feel overwhelmed. We hear lots of bad news. We've got government shutdowns. We got, we're transing our kids in the elementary schools, our universities that we once thought as bastions of liberal arts before we thought of liberal arts the way we do now. And now you go, well, those have all gone to hell in a handbag. And people start to feel overwhelmed. They start to feel frustrated. And the natural outgrowth of that is for people to just give up and just retreat to their homes. Uh, I want to know, how can we keep that from happening? And how can we prepare for what is inevitable to be coming into our churches and into our schools?
Yeah, and it's a two-front battle right now. The barbarians are no longer at the citadels; they're in the sanctuaries, or sorry, they're not no longer at the gates. They're in the citadels. They're in the
And that's to
sanctuary.
say nothing of radical Islam.
Yeah, that's right. And them partnering together to throw off the common enemy, the West
Hmm.
and the Christian and so forth. And so on the one hand, we need to be able to prepare our homes. We need to prepare our churches. We need to either leave churches that are engaged more in skinny jeans and fog machines than Ephesians 4:11 and 12 and equipping the saints from good scriptural theology and exegesis and Christian thought, Christian philosophy, even, because I think a lot of people failed in this one, in this revolution, because it is a subtle philosophy.
Yeah.
And Paul told us to beware of false philosophy, but that presupposes you are aware of it. C.S. Lewis said, if for no other reason, we need to study philosophy to counter bad philosophy. And there is good Christian philosophy out there. We could smell this kind of stuff coming. And so parents need to be prepared for this. Pastors need to prepare for this. And where do you find this? Well, there are ministries like mine that are apologetics oriented, philosophically oriented, but we try to take it down from the loft down to the level of the cows so the cows can eat. And we take these big 500-page books that might be written by like Stephen Meyer, a scholar on intelligent design theory up there in the Northwest where you're at, and say, people like him got onto the Joe Rogan podcast, first conservative intellectual in 2,000 episodes, and now Joe is knocking at the door. Richard
Yep.
Dawkins is even knocking at the door, wanting to call themselves cultural Christians. Well, we take Meyer's works and say, give that to us in 25 pages, 11th grade reading level. And we got all three of his books at the 11th grade reading level, digital, printable, 25 pages. William Lane Craig on the evidence for the resurrection, one of his two dissertations, 600 pages. Give it to us in 25, your best 25 pages, 11th grade reading level, and we have that. Everything in science, scripture, reliability of the Bible, to the problem of why does God allow evil? Why does he hide? To the new cultural apologetics issues like race, class, sex, gender, ethnicity, and so forth. But we add one component there. Not only do the authors have to be PhD or earning a PhD, they have to have the lived experience that is, sought after by the feminists and critical theorists and so forth. And so the one on trans is not only written by someone who has a master's and PhD in the area and has a 250-page book on it, but was former trans. The lesbian book was by a former lesbian, and she's working on her PhD. The one on Is Christianity a White Man's Religion? By a doctorate based on a book written and by a current Black person who is still Black and not only was Black. I kid on that, but we've got 60 of these booklets that if you go to our website and give us your email address so we send you monthly propaganda newsletters to know more about us and what's going on, you get them all for free. So
That's
there's no,
amazing.
you can't use them in your home schools, your private schools. I know one professor at Biola who uses them. I know Purdue professors who use them. So these are quality by experts, evangelical, very readable, accessible for busy people. These are aids to help all of us to know what's going on in the culture. That's one thing. The other one is we need to be about institutional recapture, and we can. It seems impossible, but you know what? What's actual and tells what's possible. We've had not just one revolution that overcame the majority of the time. We've now had a second revolution that's pushing out the poor Richard Dawkins out of the world. We need to have a third revolution in the universities. We're a ministry that is funding, we don't only have a faculty ministry, but we're funding top PhD students that are evangelicals with an evangelistic zeal who get into top 100 schools to get in there and launch Christian PhD student only ministries so that we can launch Beaches of Normandy that in 40 or 50 years, we're going to take back to universities. If people know they're listening to this, if they know good PhD candidates, send them to me. If you have funding and you want to help fund this project, if you care about this, contact us through our ratiochristi.org website. So it's a twofold battle. We need to be watching missional drift from our own institutions. It's in our churches, it's in our campus ministries, it's in our seminaries and Christian academic societies. But we also need to be going after the universities because we can't hide from this. We need to reclaim the universities.
Man, I couldn't agree more. And I also think, let's take it down to just the most basic level and get back from mission drift in our families. I love that you point out that we've got this sort of mindless Christianity and we've gotten very lazy. It's easy for us to go home and just, sit down in front of Netflix and waste our evening instead of reading good books and engaging with our children over issues that are happening around us. I started reading, of our 7 children, we have one still left at home, and she's a sophomore this year. And I picked up Mere Christianity, and we've been reading that together in the mornings. And someone said to me, Don't read that with her. She's not going to get it." And I'm like, "No, she'll get it. I'm going to
Yeah.
call her up." And I want people to understand. And sometimes, we're clawing our way through, parts of it. But guess what? It's given us things to talk about. We're having to hash the ideas of C.S. Lewis out and hold them up against what we see happening in the culture right now. And I'm trying to give her an apologetic for the world that she is about to enter without her mom and dad standing next to her. And that is what I mean. And I think it is what you mean when I say recapture the home and stop being mindless at home. There are things that we can do. We're not helpless. And I want people to feel that way. We're not helpless. We can choose to disengage, certainly. We can choose to be lazy, but these are choices that we make. I'm curious, the conversations, we got about 2 minutes left. The conversations that I hear in the culture right now, politically especially, of course, Charlie Kirk was a huge part of this. And we hear people talking about making America great again, making America good again. You talk a little bit about this. What's it going to take to make America good again?
Yeah, my final chapter is MAGA and the morning after. Can America be made great if it's not made good? And I say no.
Yep.
Uh, I am extremely thankful for someone like Trump changing the judiciary. We have been able to win, five federal court cases for appellate, 2 SCOTUS assist, and a Department of Education because of that. But we need to be infusing in our churches, in our homes, among our friends, a resurrection of the life of the mind, following Jesus, the command to love God with all of our minds, and following 1 Peter 3:15 and 16. Be prepared to give an answer
Mm.
to everyone who asks you for the reason, for the hope that's in you, and do it with gentleness and respect. There we find the head, the heart, and the hand, the fully integrated Christian, rather than the disintegrated Humpty Dumpty that we've been for the last century.
Man, so good. Corey Miller, it's just been an absolute delight to have you here. I cannot believe it has taken us this long to connect. I'd love to have you back on again. If people are interested in finding out more about your ministry, where can they go?
They can go to ratiochristi.org or they can go to ratio.link/PMA for Progressive Miseducation of America. There they can follow me, invite me to speak at their campus, their church, their conference, their side ministry. They can gain access to our resources on there, most importantly for them as well. We serve the community. We're not just parachurch, but we're para-parachurch. We're on 100 plus college campuses, but we have high school college prep that we work with schools and churches with as well.
Fantastic. ratiochristi.org. And for those of you who are not familiar, it is RATIO, Christi, CHRASTI.org. I'll link back to that in mentions today. Corey Miller, thank you for coming on the show today. It's been just a treat to have you. And I think just eye-opening. I think about all of the young people that are listening to this right now and parents who are listening, who I hope are going to go away with some hope and encouragement. So thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Heidi.
All right, you guys, I hope this has been encouraging. This has been eye-opening for me. Very powerful, this conversation with Dr. Corey Miller. I hope you guys are walking away not discouraged and overwhelmed, but equipped because the issues that are shaping this moment in history are real. They're serious. They are affecting our families, our churches, our freedoms, our universities. But as I said a minute ago, we are not powerless. We are called to be people of truth And we need to stop being lazy Christians. I think the time for lazy Christians is just absolutely over. God calls us to be people of courage and conviction. And Corey has reminded us today that ideas have consequences, and the ideas that are forming the next generation will define the future of this nation. So I'm going to encourage you guys to engage like I always do. Get off the bench, get onto the battlefield. Thank you guys so much for listening today, and I'll see you right back here again at the intersection of faith